Hi everyone, my name is Mark, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Kelly Stage was born on August 1st, 1980, in Elmira, New York, the youngest of 3 children born to Elizabeth and Howard Stage. Her father, Howard, was deeply respected in their community, having served as the chief of the West Elmira Volunteer Fire Department for many years. Kelly grew up under the watchful and protective eye of her older sister, Kim Bourgeois, who was 10 years her senior. Kim couldn't help but feel like Kelly's second mother, describing her little sister as very brave to me, bold, sassy. She liked to dance, she was pretty, she could model, and I just think that's what she wanted to do. Kelly's big personality and ambitious dreams eventually took her far from home to Las Vegas, where she traded in her teaching job to work as a cocktail waitress. She absolutely loved it there, embracing the glamorous lifestyle and even wearing elaborate costumes, including a 30-pound feather headdress that she proudly donned for work. Kim remembered how Kelly absolutely loved it and seemed to thrive in the fast-paced, exciting environment that Las Vegas offered. However, it was Kelly's attraction to an Elmira sports star that ultimately brought her back home. Thomas Clayton was a hockey player for the semi-professional Elmira Jackals and seemed to have quite a reputation both on and off the ice. He was known for fighting during games and flirting extensively when he wasn't playing. As Kim would later recall, people were very much in awe of him because he was cute, and he was an instigator, and he would start fights. People got very caught up in that. Thomas Clayton was originally from Binghamton, New York, and had attended Niagara University, where he played ice hockey before joining the Elmira Jackals. From 1998 to 2002, Thomas spent 4 seasons with the team as a forward, becoming something of a local celebrity in the small town. His charm and athletic prowess quickly gained attention, though his reputation was somewhat marred by his wild behavior and multiple romantic entanglements with various women. When Kelly and Thomas met at a hockey game during her Christmas visit home, there was an immediate attraction between them. Despite Thomas's reckless tendencies and questionable reputation, Kelly couldn't help but be drawn to his charisma and local fame. Their connection was instantaneous, and it wasn't long before Kelly made the life-changing decision to leave her exciting life in Las Vegas behind to start fresh with Thomas in New York. Within a year of meeting, Kelly and Thomas were married, and Kelly took on her husband's last name, becoming Kelly Clayton. The couple settled in the small town of Caton, New York, where they would begin building their life together. To those around them, they appeared to be deeply in love, and their friends and family believed they had found something special in each other. After an injury ended Thomas's hockey playing days, he shifted his career focus and became the owner of a water and fire damage restoration franchise called Paul Davis Emergency Services of the Southern Tier. He later became a project manager at Serve Pro, a similar franchise owned by his close friend Brian Lang. Thomas seemed dedicated to building a successful business and providing for his growing family. Kelly embraced her new role as a wife and mother while also working as a waitress at the Woodhouse Stadium Grill in Corning. Their first child, Charlie, was born in 2008, followed by their son Cullen a few years later. To outsiders, the Clayton family appeared perfect. Kelly balanced caring for their 2 children with her job, and Thomas ran his business successfully. They were busy, but seemed like a happy family of 4. However, beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to appear in their marriage. Thomas had developed a taste for gambling and wasn't secretive about the fact that he usually carried large amounts of cash with him. The couple had 2 safes in their home, each containing cash, and Thomas would often carry substantial sums to casinos where he played at high-stakes poker tables. His gambling habits were becoming increasingly concerning, and on one occasion he even loaned his car out to a friend's sister with $22,000 in cash sitting in the trunk. As their marriage progressed, it became evident to those close to them that Thomas was becoming increasingly unhappy and restless. While Kelly remained committed to their family and their marriage, Thomas seemed to be pulling away emotionally. He began having multiple extramarital affairs, something that would later become crucial evidence in understanding his motives. During his affairs, Thomas would often complain about Kelly to the other women, describing her as lazy and expressing his desire to leave her. However, he consistently told these women that he couldn't get a divorce because she would take everything from me. This pattern of behavior suggested that while Thomas wanted out of his marriage, he was unwilling to go through the traditional legal process that might cost him financially. In what would later be seen as a significant red flag, Thomas doubled Kelly's life insurance policy from $500,000 to $1 million approximately a year before her death. This substantial increase in coverage, combined with his extramarital affairs and complaints about his marriage, painted a troubling picture of a man who was planning something sinister. Thomas's behavior toward his employees was also becoming increasingly problematic. He had a pattern of keeping certain employees, particularly Michael Beard, indebted to him by providing loans, side jobs, and even vehicles. This created a relationship of dependency that he seemed to exploit, maintaining control over those who worked for him. Michael Beard was a man who had worked for Thomas at both his businesses and at ServPro, the company owned by Thomas's friend Brian Lang. Beard was familiar with the Clayton home, having performed work around the property numerous times over the years. He knew the layout of the house intimately and had been trusted with access to their personal space. However, Beard's employment came to an abrupt end just 12 days before Kelly's murder, when he was fired from ServPro. The termination was due to multiple issues, including complaints about his drinking, drug use, and stealing from clients' homes. The loss of his job left Beard in a precarious financial situation, as he could no longer afford to pay rent on the apartment he was renting from Thomas. Beard did not own a vehicle and did not have a driver's license, making his situation even more desperate. In the days following his termination, Thomas began referring Beard to potential employers and even bought him a bicycle, ostensibly to use as transportation to and from potential jobs. During this 12-day period, Thomas and Beard had frequent telephone contact, the extent of which would later be detailed exhaustively at trial using cell phone records. What appeared on the surface to be a former employer helping a down-on-his-luck employee was actually something much more sinister. The prosecution would later argue that Thomas was using Beard's desperate financial situation to manipulate him into committing murder. On September 28, 2015, Thomas made what appeared to be a routine business decision, but was actually a crucial part of his plan. He and one of his employees, Luke Tetrault, exchanged trucks earlier that day to facilitate the unloading of an ATV. However, surveillance footage from cameras at a storage unit next to the company would later show that this truck exchange was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. The footage showed Thomas's personal truck leaving the ServPro parking lot at noon, while the truck Thomas was driving, a maroon truck, was seen leaving at 1:09 p.m. and returning at 6:04 p.m. A few minutes later, it left again along with another company truck. This timing would prove to be crucial evidence in establishing the murder plot. That evening, Thomas drove to his friend Greg Miller's house in Corning for their weekly poker game, arriving around 8 p.m. in a company truck rather than his personal vehicle. The poker game was a regular Monday night event hosted by Greg and his wife, Linda, where friends and neighbors would gather to play cards. It was typically a casual, low-stakes game that would run until late in the evening. During the poker game on the evening of September 28, 2015, Thomas appeared to be having a normal evening with his friends. However, sometime before 11 p.m., he asked Linda Miller, Greg's wife, if he could borrow her cell phone to make a call. This seemingly innocent request would later become a crucial piece of evidence in the case against him. The call Thomas made from Linda's phone was placed to Michael Beard around 10:50 p.m. This communication would prove to be the signal that set the murder plot in motion. At the time, Beard was at home with his partner, who later told police that the couple had been fighting that night. After receiving the call from Thomas, Beard left his home around 11:30 p.m. on his bicycle. Following the carefully orchestrated plan, Beard cycled to ServPro, where he picked up the maroon truck that Thomas had left for him earlier. He then drove to pick up Mark Blandford, a friend who was supposed to act as a lookout during what Blandford believed was going to be a simple burglary. Blandford later claimed he had no knowledge that murder was part of the plan and thought he was only being asked to watch out while Beard committed a break-in. The maroon truck arrived back at the company parking lot at 12:55 a.m. on September 29, 2015. Surveillance footage showed someone leaving the parking lot a few minutes later on a bicycle, presumably Beard returning home the same way he had arrived. Meanwhile, at the Clayton home on Ginnon Road in Catton, Kelly was at home with her two young children, 7-year-old Charlie and 3-year-old Cullen. She had no idea that a horrific plan was about to unfold that would change their lives forever. Using a key that Thomas had given him, Michael Beard entered the Clayton house through the garage door sometime around midnight. He was wearing dark-colored jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, and a mask that would later be described by Charlie as looking like something her father wore during hunting trips. Kelly was asleep in her bedroom when Beard entered the house and went upstairs. The attack began in the master bedroom, where Beard struck Kelly twice with a fiberglass maul handle. Despite being awakened by the violent assault, Kelly managed to fight back and ran from the bedroom toward her daughter's room at the end of the hallway. In her desperate attempt to escape, Kelly fell down the stairs and crashed into the wall on the landing. She then ran across the dining room into the kitchen, but Beard caught up with her and began striking her again with the maul handle. The strikes were vicious and brutal, and he savagely beat her on the head and face until she succumbed to her injuries. The most heartbreaking aspect of this tragic crime was that Kelly's 7-year-old daughter, Charlie, witnessed much of the attack. In her innocence, Charlie initially described the intruder as a robber when questioned by police, but her detailed account would prove crucial in solving the case. Charlie told investigators that a guy came and hit my mommy with a pipe thingy, and that she thought she was dead when she was lying on the ground. Even more chilling was Charlie's recollection that during the attack, her mother had pleaded with her to "Run, Charlie, run," showing that even in her final moments, Kelly's primary concern was protecting her daughter. When Sheriff Jim Allard asked Charlie how she knew the intruder was male, her response sent chills down his spine, because his eyes looked just like Daddy's. This statement immediately raised suspicions about Thomas's involvement in his wife's murder, despite his seemingly solid alibi. During a subsequent interview at the Chemung County Child Advocacy Center, Charlie provided even more specific details about the intruder. She said he was wearing dark-colored jeans, a long-sleeved shirt, and a mask that looked like something her father wore during hunting trips. Most significantly, when asked how the assailant looked like her dad, Charlie said his mask and jeans, and confirmed that she had seen her father wear similar clothing before. Thomas returned home from the poker game sometime after 12:30 a.m. on September 29, 2015. According to his account, he found Kelly's body in the kitchen, lying in a pool of blood. The scene was horrific. There was evidence of a violent struggle that had moved from the bedroom, down the hallway, down the stairs, and into the kitchen where Kelly had finally succumbed to her injuries. In his 911 call, Thomas sounded appropriately shocked and distressed as he reported finding his wife dead. However, investigators immediately began to suspect that his reaction didn't quite ring true. There was something about his demeanor and the way he described the scene that raised red flags for the responding officers. When police arrived at the scene, they found what Deputy Dean Swan described as an extremely bloody crime scene. Swan, who was wearing a body camera, captured footage of the horrific aftermath that seemed almost too shocking to be real. The evidence indicated that Kelly had been beaten to death with tremendous force, suffering severe blunt force trauma to her head and face. The crime scene showed no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be missing from the house, which immediately ruled out a robbery gone wrong. The attack appeared to have been personal and targeted, focused solely on killing Kelly, rather than stealing anything of value. Within hours of the murder, Kelly's family members arrived at the scene. Kim Bourgeois and her mother, Elizabeth, were at the house within an hour of the police arrival. Kim later described the horror of that moment. "My mother and I were wailing. I was throwing up on the side of the road. I can't even explain to you that feeling." As investigators began to piece together what had happened, they immediately focused on Thomas as a potential suspect. While his alibi appeared solid, he had been at the poker game with multiple witnesses who could corroborate his presence. Something about the situation didn't add up. The investigation took a significant turn when Linda Miller, Greg's wife from the poker game, told police that Thomas had asked to borrow her cell phone around 90 minutes before Kelly's body was discovered. This seemingly innocent detail became a crucial piece of the puzzle when investigators discovered that the call had been placed to Michael Beard. Phone records revealed that Thomas and Beard had been in frequent contact in the days leading up to the murder, which was unusual given that Beard was no longer an employee of Thomas's companies. The extensive communication between them, combined with Beard's recent termination and desperate financial situation, painted a picture of a murder-for-hire plot. When police brought Michael Beard in for questioning, he initially confessed to killing Kelly Clayton. According to his confession, Thomas had hired him to murder Kelly and burn down the house so that Thomas could collect the insurance money. Beard claimed that Thomas had offered him $10,000 to carry out the hit. In his confession, Beard described how the murder plot had been discussed as early as April 2015, when Thomas had allegedly offered him $10,000 for an unspecified job that could mean jail time. Beard claimed he had jokingly asked Thomas if he wanted his wife killed for that kind of money, and that Thomas had smiled but didn't provide any other details at the time. The plan allegedly came together after Beard was fired from ServPro on September 17, 2015. According to Beard's account, Thomas picked him up that same day as he was walking home and began asking what he would do for income and rent money. Beard lived in an apartment that Thomas owned and claimed that Thomas offered him 5 months of rent-free living in addition to the $10,000 to kill Kelly. However, in a stunning turn of events, Beard later recanted his confession before trial. He changed his story completely, claiming that Thomas had only hired him to burn down the house for insurance money, and that when he arrived at the Clayton home, he found Kelly already dead. According to this new version of events, Beard panicked upon seeing the body and fled without setting the fire, which explained why the house was never burned. Despite Beard's recantation, investigators had substantial physical evidence linking him to the crime. Most significantly, Beard's DNA was found on the murder weapon, the fiberglass maul handle that had been used to beat Kelly to death. After his initial confession, Beard had led police to several crucial pieces of evidence that he had disposed of after the murder. These included the murder weapon, which had been thrown into a wooded area, bloody clothes that he had worn during the attack, and keys to the Clayton home that Thomas had given him to gain entry. The bloody clothes were recovered from a swampy area located approximately 40 feet from an inn in Elmira, the same inn about which Thomas had previously inquired about the presence of surveillance cameras. Genetic testing confirmed that Beard's DNA was on the clothing, providing irrefutable evidence of his involvement in the murder. The case against Thomas Clayton was built largely on circumstantial evidence, but it was overwhelming in its scope and detail. Surveillance footage from the storage facility next to ServPro showed the carefully orchestrated vehicle exchange that had allowed Beard to use Thomas's truck to travel to and from the murder scene. GPS data from the company trucks provided a detailed timeline of movements on the night of the murder. The data showed Thomas driving a green ServPro truck that left the company at 6:10 p.m. and arrived at the Clayton home at 7:25 p.m. The truck left the Clayton home at 7:37 p.m. and arrived in Corning 14 minutes later for the poker game. More crucially, the GPS data picked up again on September 29, 2015, when Thomas turned on the truck at 12:22 a.m., and it showed the vehicle arriving back at the Clayton home at 12:35 a.m., the time when he allegedly discovered Kelly's body and called 911. The investigation revealed that Thomas's motives for wanting Kelly dead were both financial and personal. In addition to doubling her life insurance policy, Thomas had been having multiple extramarital affairs and had expressed his desire to be free of his marriage while avoiding the financial consequences of divorce. 3 women testified during the trial about their sexual relationships with Thomas while he was married to Kelly. Shockingly, one of these women was only 15 years old at the time of the alleged affair. All 3 testified that Thomas frequently complained about Kelly, calling her lazy, and stating that he planned to leave her but couldn't because she would take everything in a divorce. The prosecution argued that Thomas wanted both his freedom and Kelly's life insurance money, making murder for hire a more attractive option than divorce. His pattern of behavior with the other women showed a man who was deeply dissatisfied with his marriage, but unwilling to face the financial consequences of ending it legally. Thomas Clayton and Michael Beard were tried separately, with Beard's trial taking place first in late 2016. Despite his recanted confession, the jury found the physical evidence overwhelming. Michael Beard was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Thomas Clayton's trial began in early 2017 and lasted several weeks. After 6 weeks of proceedings and 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Thomas guilty of first-degree murder in February 2017. In April 2017, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During his sentencing, he maintained his innocence, telling the court, "I had absolutely nothing to do with the murder of Kelly." The most tragic aspect of this case was its impact on Kelly's children. In a heartbreaking letter read at Thomas's sentencing, Charlie wrote, "I love my mom, I love my dad, but my dad is a coward because he made Michael Beard kill my mommy." Custody of the children was given to Kelly's sister, Kim Bourgeois, who has worked tirelessly to provide them with a loving home.